Every map of reality you have ever carried inside your mind is probably missing most of what exists. Not because the map is wrong, not because science has failed, but because human intuition evolved beneath a single ski on a single world orbiting a single star. Everything about the way we think assumes that reality comes in one piece. One Earth, one history, one life, one universe, and perhaps one ending. Death fits comfortably inside that picture. It has always occupied a clearly defined place within the human imagination. You are born. You exist briefly. You disappear. Whatever mysteries surround death, at least its boundaries appear understandable. There is a before, there is an after. There is a finite story contained between the two. For thousands of years, civilizations have feared death because it seems to represent the edge of existence itself. The final wall, the last horizon, the place beyond which nothing can be known. But what if death is not the most unsettling horizon? What if something else waits beyond it? Not an afterlife, not a judgment, not a paradise, not a void, something far stranger, something that emerges naturally from mathematics, cosmology, and the deepest theories modern physics has produced. Imagine standing beneath a perfectly dark sky. No city lights, no moon, only stars. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands. To your eyes, the universe appears enormous, almost incomprehensibly large. Yet what you are seeing is not the universe. It is not even close. It's merely a tiny illuminated surface on an ocean whose true size may exceed all human comprehension. The stars visible tonight belong to a small neighborhood inside a galaxy. That galaxy belongs to a local cluster. That cluster belongs to a larger cosmic structure. And that structure exists within the observable universe. Already, the observable universe contains more stars than there have been seconds since Earth first formed. More galaxies than generations of humans who have ever lived. More distance than language can comfortably describe. Yet according to many of our best scientific models, even this staggering expanse may not represent the whole of reality. Instead, it may be only a visible bubble, a small island surrounded by something much larger. Something potentially endless, something that never stops. And if reality truly extends beyond our observable horizon, an unsettling consequence begins to emerge. Because infinite space behaves differently from large space. Infinite time behaves differently from long time. Infinite possibility behaves differently from unlikely possibility. Beyond a certain scale, intuition stops functioning. The rules that guide ordinary experience begin to fail. Things that seem impossible become unavoidable. Things that seem unique become common. Things that seem meaningful become difficult to define. And somewhere in that collapse of intuition, a deeply uncomfortable question appears. What if there is not one version of reality? What if there are countless versions? What if every decision, every history, every civilization, every possible outcome exists somewhere within a structure so vast that words like existence and non-existence begin to lose their familiar meaning? This is not science fiction. It's not established fact either. It is a possibility emerging from several serious attempts to understand the universe we already observe. And the disturbing part is not that these ideas are strange. The disturbing part is that they arise naturally from equations designed to explain reality itself. Because once the possibility of a multiverse enters the picture, death no longer occupies the position we assign to it. It becomes merely one event inside a much larger landscape. A landscape containing possibilities so numerous, so alien, and so psychologically overwhelming that mortality may begin to seem almost comforting by comparison. The fear of death comes from confronting an unknown future. The fear of the multiverse comes from confronting too much future, too much existence, too much possibility, too many versions of everything, including you. And this is where the familiar image of reality begins to tremble. Because the universe you think you inhabit may be only a tiny room inside a structure so immense that even eternity struggles to describe it. A structure where uniqueness becomes fragile, where identity becomes uncertain, where existence itself may have no obvious center, and where the question is no longer whether reality is larger than we imagined, but whether it is so much larger that the human mind was never built to truly understand it. For most of human history, reality felt manageable, not small, not simple, but bounded. Ancient civilizations looked upward and saw a dome of stars. Beyond that dome lay mystery, perhaps gods, or perhaps darkness, perhaps realms inaccessible to mortal beings. Yet regardless of what existed beyond, the structure itself appeared finite. Reality possessed edges, even after the scientific revolution transformed our understanding of the cosmos. That instinct remained. The Earth became a planet. The sun became a star. The stars became members of a galaxy. The galaxy became one among billions. Each discovery expanded the map, but the map still felt singular. There was one cosmos, one timeline, one unfolding story. Human beings occupied a tiny position within it, yet they still belonged to the same shared reality. Every person who had ever lived participated in a common universe. The farmer who watched the Nile flood 5,000 years ago, the sailor crossing the Pacific centuries before modern maps, the child looking through a telescope tonight, all occupied the different moments of the same cosmic narrative. This assumption runs deeper than most people realize. Language itself depends upon it. When we speak about history, we imagine one sequence of events. When we speak about the future, we imagine one destination. When we speak about ourselves, we imagine one identity moving through time. You were a child. You became an adult. One continuous consciousness traveled from one moment to the next. The details changed. The person evolved, yet the thread remained intact. The universe appeared to behave similarly. One beginning, one expansion, one future, one eventual ending. There is tremendous psychological comfort in this structure. Even when reality feels frightening, it remains coherent. There is one stage upon which existence unfolds. One arena containing every joy, tragedy, civilization, extinction, and dream. Modern astronomy has made that stage astonishingly large. The observable universe stretches so far that light itself requires billions of years to cross it. When astronomers point powerful telescopes toward distant galaxies, they are not simply looking across space. They are looking backward through time. Some of the light arriving at Earth tonight began its journey before our species existed, before human language, before agriculture, before cities, before history. Entire civilizations rose and vanished, while those photons travelled silently through intergalactic darkness. Already, this scale is difficult to absorb emotionally. The human brain evolved to navigate forests, rivers, storms, and social groups. It did not evolve to comprehend billions of years. It did not evolve to visualize distances measured in light itself. When we hear numbers such as 13 billion years, our minds often translate them into abstractions. But reality is not abstract. Every second of that unimaginable duration actually occurred. Every moment unfolded one after another. Cosmic history possesses a depth that dwarfs all human memory. If Earth's entire history were compressed into a single calendar year, recorded civilization would occupy only the final seconds before midnight on the final day. Everything we call history would become a brief flicker, a passing spark. And yet, despite this overwhelming scale, the observable universe still feels understandable in one crucial respect. It remains singular. There is only one version, one cosmos, one reality, one grand stage. This assumption survives even as scientific discoveries repeatedly diminish humanity's significance. We are not at the center of the solar system. We are not at the center of the galaxy. We are not at the center of the universe. But at least there is still one universe. At least there remains one reality shared by everything that exists. The emotional consequences of this belief are profound, because uniqueness depends upon it. Your life is unique because only one version exists. History matters because it happened once. Choices matter because alternatives vanished. Every decision creates a future while eliminating countless others. When a civilization falls, it is gone. When a species disappears, it's lost. When a person dies, an irreplaceable perspective leaves the universe forever. Meaning itself is closely tied to scarcity. A single painting feels valuable because there is only one original. A single life feels precious because it cannot be repeated. A single moment matters because it will never occur again. This framework quietly shapes almost every human philosophy, whether religious or secular, ancient or modern. Optimistic or pessimistic? Most systems of thought assume a singular reality, one existence, one history, one chain of cause and effect. Even many scientific discussions unconsciously inherit this perspective. We speak about the universe as though it represents the totality of existence. The phrase itself encourages that assumption. The universe, not a universe, not one among many. The universe, the complete set of everything that exists. But this is where the stability begins to weaken, because over the last century, cosmology has uncovered clues suggesting that the observable universe may not represent the entirety of reality. Not even close. What appears to be the whole may merely be the visible portion, a tiny region inside something vastly larger. And once that possibility emerges, familiar assumptions begin to unravel. Because if the observable universe is not the whole structure, then the question immediately becomes unavoidable. What lies beyond it? Not beyond in the sense of travel. No spacecraft will ever reach the horizon. No signal signal can cross it. No future civilization will simply build a faster engine and explore what waits outside. The boundary is woven into the structure of space-time itself. Beyond the observable universe lies a region permanently inaccessible to us, a place that can never become part of human experience. And yet physics suggests it may still exist. Entire cosmic domains forever hidden from observation. Entire histories forever unseen. Entire regions of reality disconnected from everything humanity will ever know. At first glance, this seems merely scientific, a technical detail buried within cosmology. But the implications are much larger, because once reality extends beyond observation, the universe stops feeling like a complete story. Instead, it begins to resemble a fragment, a visible island surrounded by darkness, a small illuminated room whose walls suddenly reveal hidden doorways, and what waits beyond those doorways may be far stranger than the room itself. This is where the picture begins to change, not because we've discovered another universe, not because we possess proof of alternate realities, but because modern physics has opened a crack in the assumption that existence comes in only one piece, a small crack, a subtle crack, yet large enough for something immense to appear behind it. Something that transforms the universe from a singular story into the possibility of countless stories unfolding beyond every horizon we can ever reach. The first step towards the multiverse did not begin with an attempt to discover other universes. It began with a problem, a surprisingly ordinary scientific problem. By the late 20th century, cosmologists had become increasingly confident that the universe began in a hot, dense state roughly 13.8 billion years ago. Evidence was accumulating from every direction. Galaxies were moving apart. Ancient radiation-filled space, the large-scale structure of the cosmos, appeared consistent with an expanding universe. Yet hidden inside this successful model were several puzzles that seemed small at first. But small puzzles have a habit of opening enormous doors. One of these mysteries concerned temperature. When astronomers examined the cosmic microwave background, the ancient light left behind shortly after the Big Bang, they discovered something remarkable. The universe appeared astonishingly uniform. Regions separated by vast distances possessed nearly identical temperatures. At first, this sounds unremarkable. Uniformity often feels natural. But in reality, it was deeply strange. Imagine standing at opposite ends of an ocean larger than Earth itself, and discovering that every wave, every current, every temperature measurement matched with extraordinary precision. You would immediately suspect some form of communication, some process allowing distant regions to influence one another. Yet according to the standard model of cosmic expansion, many regions of the early universe should never have been able to exchange information. They were simply too far apart. Light had not possessed enough time to travel between them. The universe somehow appeared coordinated without having the opportunity to coordinate itself. Another puzzle involved geometry. Observations suggested that space-time itself was remarkably flat. Not approximately flat, exceptionally flat. Balanced so delicately that even tiny deviations during the universe's infancy should have grown dramatically over billions of years. Yet somehow the cosmos emerged almost perfectly balanced. Again, the result seemed less natural the more scientists examined it. The universe looked suspiciously fine-tuned, as though something had smoothed it, something had stretched it, something had erased the irregularities that should have remained visible. Then, in the early 1980s, physicists proposed a radical idea: cosmic inflation. According to inflationary theory, the universe experienced an extraordinarily brief but unimaginably violent period of expansion immediately after the Big Bang. Not ordinary expansion, something far more extreme. See? Space itself expanded faster than light could travel through it. Tiny quantum fluctuations were stretched across cosmic distances. Regions once close together became separated by immense gulfs. In a fraction of a second, a microscopic patch of reality expanded into something vastly larger. Suddenly, many of the old puzzles began to make sense. Areas that seem disconnected today may once have been neighbours. The smoothness of the cosmos became easier to explain. Its geometry became easier to understand. Inflation appeared capable of solving several major problems simultaneously. Over time, evidence continued accumulating in its favour. Today, inflation remains one of the leading explanations for the universe's earliest moments. But something unexpected happened. Scientists followed the mathematics further, and the mathematics refused to stop where they wanted it to stop. The original goal had been modest: explain the universe we see. Instead, the equations began hinting at something much larger, something unsettling, because inflation is not merely an explanation for our cosmic neighbourhood. Under many versions of the theory, inflation becomes self-sustaining, eternal, endless, like a fire that never completely burns out. In this picture, inflation ends in some regions. Those regions become universes. Stars form, galaxies emerge, time unfolds, observers appear, reality becomes recognizable. But elsewhere, inflation continues. Space keeps expanding. New regions separate from old ones. Additional universes emerge, again and again, without obvious end, without obvious limit. Imagine boiling hot. Bubbles appear within the liquid. Each bubble possesses its own boundary, its own interior, its own identity. Now imagine a cosmic version of this process unfolding on scales beyond comprehension. Not bubbles in water, universes inside an eternally inflating background, each bubble becoming an entire cosmos, each containing billions of galaxies, each potentially possessing its own history stretching across billions of years. Our universe would not be the whole ocean, only one bubble among countless others. And perhaps not even a particularly special one. This idea changes the emotional landscape of existence in a subtle but profound way, because until now, scale has merely expanded. The universe became larger, older, more complex, yet it remained singular. Inflation threatens that assumption. Reality no longer resembles one vast kingdom. Instead, it begins resembling an endless archipelago of cosmic islands scattered across a sea no observer can ever fully map, and the distances involved make ordinary astronomical scales seem almost intimate. The observable universe already contains regions forever unreachable. Inflation introduces realms beyond even those unreachable realms. Entire universes permanently isolated from one another, not separated by millions of light years. Not separated by billions, separated by expanding space-time structures that prevent contact forever. No message can cross, no traveller can arrive, no civilization can bridge the gap. The separation is absolute. This is where the emotional implications begin to deepen, because humans instinctively associate existence with potential connection. A distant galaxy may be unreachable, but it still belongs to the same universe. It participates in the same physical reality. Inflation challenges even that comfort. There may exist regions of existence so detached from us that they effectively occupy different realities, entire cosmic histories unfolding without any possibility of interaction, entire civilizations that could arise, flourish, and vanish without ever sharing a single photon with our universe. And the strange part is that this idea does not emerge from fantasy. It emerges from attempts to explain observations we can actually make, measurements, radiation, geometry, the structure of the cosmos itself. The road toward the multiverse was not constructed to satisfy curiosity about alternate realities. It appeared accidentally, as a side effect, as an implication hidden inside equations describing the early universe. And physicists remain divided about what this implication means. Some view eternal inflation as a powerful possibility. Others remain skeptical. Important questions remain unresolved. Evidence remains indirect. Certainty remains unavailable. Yet even uncertainty carries weight, because once the door has been opened, it cannot easily be closed. The possibility exists, and that possibility changes how reality feels. The universe stops resembling a complete object. Instead, it begins resembling a visible fragment of something vastly larger. A single chapter from a library whose shelves disappear into darkness. A single island surrounded by oceans no traveller can cross. A single bubble floating inside a structure so enormous that words like outside and beyond begin losing their familiar meaning. But an even stranger consequence waits ahead, because if reality truly extends far beyond the observable universe, another possibility emerges, a possibility that feels less like cosmology and more like a mirror. The possibility that somewhere unimaginably far away there may be another Earth. Not similar, not approximate. The same, and if space is large enough, another version of you may already be looking into another sky, wondering exactly the same thing. The idea sounds absurd at first. Another Earth, another you, another history unfolding somewhere beyond the horizon. Most people instinctively place such concepts into the category of fiction, stories, speculation, imagination. Yet the uncomfortable aspect of this possibility is that it emerges not from fantasy, but from mathematics. And mathematics is often indifferent to what is good, what feels reasonable. Human intuition evolved within a world of limited possibilities. We encounter finite landscapes, finite lifetimes, finite population. Our experience rarely prepares us for what happens when numbers become unimaginably large, much less when they become effectively infinite. To understand the problem, imagine shuffling a deck of cards. The number of possible arrangements is enormous. So enormous that if every human who has ever lived shuffled decks continuously for the entire history of civilization, most possible arrangements would never appear. The space of possibilities is vast, yet it remains finite. Given enough time and enough attempts, repetitions eventually become inevitable. The larger the system, the longer the wait, but inevitability slowly replaces improbability. Now expand this logic to reality itself. Every human being is composed of atoms. Those atoms can be arranged in many ways. The number of possible arrangements is staggeringly large, far beyond ordinary comprehension, yet according to known physics, it is still finite. There are only so many ways matter can organize itself within a given region of space. This creates a strange consequence. If space itself extends forever, then the number of available regions eventually exceeds the number of possible arrangements. And once that threshold is crossed, repetition becomes unavoidable. Not likely, not probable. Unavoidable. Imagine a library so large that it contains every possible book. At first, most volumes appear unique. But eventually duplicates begin appearing, then duplicates of duplicates, then slightly altered versions, then versions differing by a single letter, then versions differing by a single sentence. The larger the library becomes, the more repetition emerges. Infinite space behaves similarly. Given enough room, every physically possible arrangement of matter must occur again, and again, and again. This idea was explored seriously by physicists and cosmologists examining the implications of an infinite universe, not because they wished it to be true, because the mathematics appeared difficult to avoid. If the cosmos is sufficiently large or infinite, then somewhere there may exist another Earth. Not metaphorically, literally, an arrangement of matter identical to this planet, an identical identical atmosphere, identical continents, identical oceans, identical history. Every mountain, every city, every conversation, every memory, every decision. Repeated, the distance required would be almost inconceivably vast, so vast that language struggles to describe it. Not billions of light years, not trillions. Numbers so large that ordinary astronomical scales begin to seem microscopic. Yet in an infinite universe, size ceases to matter. No matter how unlikely an arrangement becomes, infinite space eventually accommodates it. And this is where the first true crack appears in our understanding of uniqueness, because most people quietly assume that their existence is singular, not necessarily important, not necessarily central, but unique. There has never been another combination of experiences exactly like yours, never another consciousness following precisely the same path, never another sequence of moments identical to the one you inhabit. This assumption feels obvious, natural, almost self-evident, yet infinite space undermines it, somewhere, beyond distances so extreme that no human mind can visualize them. Another version of your life may already exist. Not a copy created later, not a simulation, not a descendant, a parallel repetition generated by the sheer scale of reality itself. Every word you have spoken, every mistake, every triumph, every regret, repeated. The realization feels strange because it attacks something deeper than geography. It attacks identity. Most people think of themselves as individuals because they occupy a distinct position in history, a unique thread woven into the fabric of time. But what becomes of uniqueness if the thread appears elsewhere? What becomes of individuality if reality contains countless repetitions? The answer is not obvious, and the discomfort grows when we consider variations. Because exact duplicates are only the beginning, there may also be Earths almost identical to ours. Earths where a single election ended differently. Earths where a storm altered history. Earths where a scientist made a different discovery. Earths where a civilization survived. Earths where one never emerged. Earths where you made another choice years ago. The number of possibilities expands rapidly. Soon, reality begins resembling a vast landscape of branching outcomes, a terrain populated not by one history, but by countless neighboring histories differing in subtle ways. The familiar image of existence starts dissolving. The universe no longer feels like a single story. Instead, it resembles an immense catalogue containing every variation permitted by physics. And what most people never realize is that this conclusion arises before quantum mechanics enters the discussion. Before alternate timelines, before many worlds interpretations, before the more exotic forms of the multiverse. Simple scale alone already creates profound consequences. Space itself becomes the mechanism, distance becomes the generator, infinity becomes the architect. The emotional effect is difficult to describe. Because humans derive meaning from rarity, a unique object feels valuable, a unique moment feels significant. A unique life feels irreplaceable. When duplicates enter the picture, something shifts, not necessarily because meaning disappears, but because its foundation becomes less certain. Imagine learning that somewhere beyond all possible travel, another person possesses your face, your memories, your fears, your ambitions, and your history. Would that diminish your existence? Would it change who you are? Would it matter at all? There is no universally accepted answer. Yet the question itself reveals how fragile our intuitions may be. We assume uniqueness because our daily experience offers no alternative. Reality may not be obligated to preserve that assumption. And there is an even darker implication hidden beneath the idea. If infinite space generates every physically possible arrangement, then it does not merely generate worlds we prefer. It generates every world physics allows, every disaster, every catastrophe, every extinction, every improbable tragedy, every improbable success, not possible. Reality chooses them, because infinite possibility eventually includes them. The comforting notion that our history is special begins to erode. History becomes one example among countless examples. Civilization becomes one pattern among countless patterns. Humanity becomes one local expression of possibilities unfolding across an immeasurable expanse. At first glance, this may seem liberating. A universe overflowing with possibilities. But viewed from another angle, it becomes unsettling, because individuality begins dissolving into statistics. Uniqueness begins dissolving into repetition. Identity begins dissolving into scale. And this is only the first level of the multiverse. A consequence emerging from space itself. The next possibility is stranger, far stranger, because some physicists believe reality may not merely contain distant duplicates separated by unimaginable distances. Reality itself may continuously divide, not across space, but across possibility. And if that idea is correct, the number of versions of existence may not simply be large. It may be growing every moment, including countless versions of you, including versions that never experience the life you know, including versions that never arrive at the future you expect. And this is where the picture becomes genuinely difficult to hold together. The human mind is surprisingly comfortable with large numbers. At least, it believes it is. We casually speak about millions, billion, and trillions as though they represent different sizes of the same thing. Merely larger piles, merely greater quantities. Yet there comes a point where scale ceases to be an increase in size and becomes a completely different category of reality. This is one of the hidden lessons of cosmology, and it is one of the reasons the multiverse feels so unsettling, because the deeper we follow its implications, the less reality resembles a place and the more it resembles an endless process. A process generating possibilities faster than intuition can contain them. Imagine standing on a beach. Each grain of sand beneath your feet represents a star. The beach stretches beyond the horizon in both directions. Already the image feels immense, yet the observable universe contains far more stars than there are grains of sand on all Earth's beaches combined. This comparison has become familiar because it helps translate cosmic numbers into something tangible. But the multiverse forces us beyond even that, because now the stars themselves become grains of sand. Entire galaxies become grains of sand. Entire observable universes become grains of sand, and the beach keeps expanding. Not for miles, not for continents, not for planets, without visible end. The problem is not merely that reality becomes larger. The problem is that the meaning of large begins to fail. Language evolved to describe finite environments. Forests, mountains, rivers, storms, even the largest natural phenomena encountered by our ancestors remain bounded. The multiverse introduces structures that may possess no meaningful boundary at all. And once boundaries disappear, many familiar assumptions disappear with them. Consider how humans understand identity. A person exists because they occupy a specific location, a specific body, a specific history. These constraints create individuality. They separate one life from another. But what happens when reality becomes large enough to contain endless repetitions of every physically possible arrangement? The answer is deeply uncomfortable. Identity begins losing its exclusivity. Not necessarily its value, but its exclusivity. Somewhere beyond incomprehensible distances, another civilization may be asking the same questions. Not a similar civilization, an identical one. Its scientists constructing the same theories, its philosophers debating the same mysteries, its observers staring into the same darkness, its version of humanity wondering whether it is alone. And because the scale involved is so overwhelming, such civilizations would never know about one another. They would remain permanently isolated, each believing itself unique, each unaware of the others. The image is strangely haunting. Countless islands of consciousness scattered through an endless ocean. Each island surrounded by horizons it can never cross. Each island convinced it occupies a singular position in existence. The reality, if such a structure exists, would be profoundly different. Uniqueness would become local rather than universal. Specialness would become relative rather than absolute. Meaning would remain possible, but it would emerge from perspective rather than rarity. This is where scale becomes psychologically dangerous, Because human beings instinctively seek centrality, not necessarily cosmic importance, but some stable reference point, something that says here is where reality matters, here is where existence becomes meaningful. The history of science has repeatedly eroded those reference points. The Earth lost its central position. The solar system lost its central position. The Milky Way lost its central position. The observable universe itself may now be losing its central position. Every expansion of scale pushes humanity further from the middle, further from certainty, further from the comforting belief that reality is organized around our perspective. Yet the multiverse introduces something even stranger. It removes not only centrality but exclusivity. There may be no privileged location, no privileged observer, no privileged history, only an immense collection of possibilities unfolding simultaneously. Imagine opening a book and discovering that every possible version of the story exists. Not one narrative, not one ending, every variation, every decision, every alternative path. At first this seems enriching. More stories, more possibilities, but eventually a peculiar feeling emerges. The story stops feeling singular. The significance of any individual path becomes harder to define. This tension appears again and again within multiverse discussions. People often assume the unsettling aspect is physical scale. In truth, the deeper discomfort is conceptual. The multiverse challenges the uniqueness of events. If every possibility exists somewhere, then history ceases to be a singular sequence and becomes part of a much larger pattern. A pattern so vast that individual outcomes begin blending into an immense statistical landscape. And yet reality grows stranger still, because even infinite space may not represent the largest form of the multiverse. There are proposals suggesting entire universes could possess different physical conditions, different cosmic histories, different structure, different outcomes, different laws. The implications quickly become difficult to visualize. Imagine universes where stars form differently. Universes where galaxies never emerge. Universes where chemistry behaves differently. Universes where complexity becomes impossible. Universes that remain forever dark. Universes that expand too rapidly for structure to develop. Universes that collapse shortly after birth. Universes empty of observers. Universes overflowing with them. Suddenly the multiverse is no longer a collection of alternate Earths. It becomes a landscape of alternate realities, a vast cosmic ecology populated by radically different forms of existence. And our universe becomes one member of that larger population. One example, one outcome, one successful configuration among countless possibilities. The emotional shift is subtle but profound. For centuries, humanity asked why the universe appears finely tuned for life, why physical constants seem balanced so delicately, why complexity emerged at all. Inside a sufficiently large multiverse, the question changes. Perhaps countless sterile universes exist, countless failed realities, countless cosmic experiments producing nothing but darkness. We simply inhabit one of the rare regions where observers can emerge. Not because our universe was selected, not because it was designed, because only successful universes contain beings capable of asking the question. This idea, known in various forms through anthropic reasoning, offers a possible explanation for some of cosmology's deepest mysteries, but explanations are not always comforting, because they often remove the special role we imagined for ourselves. Humanity becomes less like the purpose of the universe and more like a byproduct of statistics, a fortunate consequence of physical conditions that happen to permit complexity. The multiverse does not necessarily make life meaningless, but it does make life feel smaller, more contingent, more fragile, like a brief emergence inside a much larger process that neither notices nor requires our existence. And the scale keeps growing. Because once we allow ourselves to imagine countless universes, another realization appears. Every universe possesses its own stars, its own galaxies, its own vast stretches of emptiness. The loneliness already present within our cosmos may be replicated again and again across unimaginable numbers of realities. Not one silent universe, potentially countless silent universe, countless horizons, countless civilizations, countless observers staring into darkness, and none able to reach beyond the walls of their own cosmic island. What began as an attempt to explain the early universe has gradually transformed into something else. A picture of existence so immense that individual universes become small components within a larger structure. A structure that may generate realities endlessly. A structure that may possess no center, no edge, no final destination, only continuous creation unfolding across scales beyond comprehension. And if this picture is even partially correct, then the universe humanity has spent centuries trying to understand may not be the main stage of existence at all. It may be only one room inside a structure whose true size remains hidden behind horizons we can never cross. A realization that is both intellectually beautiful and quietly terrifying. Because the larger reality becomes, the harder it is to find a place where the mind can finally rest. At this point, it becomes tempting to treat the multiverse as a philosophical idea, a metaphor for possibility, a poetic way of discussing infinity. But the reason physicists continue debating it is because some of its foundations emerge from real mathematics, real observations, and real attempts to solve problems inside established science. The multiverse is unsettling partly because it refuses to remain entirely in the realm of imagination. Its roots reach into some of the most successful theories ever developed, and nowhere is this more apparent than in quantum mechanics. Few scientific frameworks have been tested more thoroughly. For over a century, quantum theory has predicted experimental results with astonishing accuracy. The devices surrounding modern civilization computers, lasers, semiconductors, medical imaging system depend upon principles discovered through quantum physics. Again and again, the equations work, yet beneath their success lies a mystery that remains unresolved. Not a mystery about calculations, a mystery about reality itself. Quantum mechanics describes the behavior of matter and energy at extremely small scales. At these scales, nature behaves differently than everyday intuition expects. Particles do not possess neatly defined properties in the way classical objects do. Instead, they are described by mathematical structures known as wave functions. These wave functions represent possibilities, probabilities, potential outcomes. Before a measurement occurs, multiple outcomes may coexist within the mathematic. Then something strange happens. Observation produces a specific result. One possibility becomes reality. At least that is how the story is often told. But physicists have never fully agreed on what this process actually means. The equations predict outcomes remarkably well. The interpretation remains uncertain. This uncertainty has produced one of the deepest questions in science. What exactly happens when quantum possibilities become observed realities? For decades, various interpretations attempted to answer this question. Some proposed hidden mechanisms. Some invoked randomness. Some suggested information plays a central role. Others accepted uncertainty as a fundamental feature of nature. Then, in 1957, a young physicist named Hugh Everett III proposed something radical. Perhaps nothing collapses. Perhaps the wave function never chooses. Perhaps every possibility continues. According to what later became known as the many worlds interpretation, reality does not eliminate alternative outcomes. Reality contains them all. When a quantum event possesses multiple possible results, the universe does not select one while discarding the others. Instead, the larger quantum structure continues evolving, encompassing every outcome simultaneously. Each possibility becomes part of an expanding collection of histories, not metaphorical histories, actual branches of reality. The idea remains controversial. Many physicists support other interpretations. Others view many worlds as a legitimate consequence of taking quantum mathematics seriously. The debate continues. Yet regardless of where one stands, the implications are extraordinary. Because the multiverse generated by many worlds differs profoundly from the multiverse created by infinite space. Earlier, duplicates emerged because reality became large enough to repeat itself. Now duplicates emerge because reality may continuously branch. The distinction matters. In an infinite universe, another version of you might exist somewhere unimaginably distant. In many worlds, alternative versions may emerge every moment. Every unresolved quantum event potentially contributes to an ever-growing structure of diverging histories. The image is difficult to visualize because human experience never reveals it directly. You perceive one sequence of events, one unfolding timeline, one continuous life. The branching, if it occurs, remains hidden. From your perspective, only one outcome becomes visible. Yet beneath that perspective, the larger structure may contain countless alternatives. Imagine standing at a crossroads. You choose one path. From ordinary experience, the other path disappears. Its future never occurs. Its possibilities vanish. Many worlds suggest something different. The path you did not choose continues elsewhere. Not as a hypothetical, not as imagination, as another branch within the total quantum description of reality. Again, this is not established fact. It is one interpretation among several, but it is an interpretation taken seriously, because it arises from equations already known to describe nature with extraordinary precision. And this is what makes the idea emotionally powerful. The multiverse does not arrive from mythology. It arrives from attempts to understand experiments, laboratories, measurement, data. The deeper scientists explore fundamental reality, the stranger the conceptual landscape becomes. What most people never realize is that quantum mechanics already challenges many assumptions about certainty. The multiverse simply extends those challenges further. We naturally imagine history as fixed, a single chain of events, one outcome replacing all alternatives. Quantum theory suggests reality may be less straightforward. Possibility itself may occupy a more substantial role than common intuition allows. And if possibilities are not discarded, if they continue existing within some larger structure, then reality becomes unimaginably rich and unimaginably complicated. Every moment generates new distinctions, new histories, new futures. The branching structure expands relentlessly, not every second in a dramatic sense, not every decision in the simplistic way often portrayed in fiction. The actual physics is far more subtle, yet the underlying implication remains. Reality may be vastly larger than the portion any observer experiences. Your life feels singular because consciousness follows one path through an immense landscape of possibilities, but the landscape itself may be far larger than the path. This realization creates an unusual form of existential discomfort. Death has traditionally represented the termination of a life, a definitive ending, a boundary beyond which experience ceases. The multiverse complicates that picture, not because it offers immortality. Many popular discussions misunderstand this point. Branches do not preserve personal continuity in any simple way. They do not guarantee survival. They do not transform mortality into a trivial concern. What they do is undermine the neatness of endings. Reality becomes harder to summarize, harder to package into a single narrative, harder to reduce to one definitive outcome. And humans are creatures that crave definitive outcomes. We seek conclusions, final chapters, clear endings. The multiverse repeatedly dissolves those boundaries, not only in cosmology, not only in quantum theory, but in our deepest assumptions about how reality organizes itself. The universe begins to resemble less a story and more a vast structure of possibilities, an architecture of branching futures extending beyond observation. Most of those branches, if they exist, would remain forever inaccessible. No communication, no travel, no verification through direct experience. Only mathematics pointing towards something larger, something hidden, something potentially real. And this is where scientific reality begins deepening into something emotionally stranger, because the question is no longer whether multiple universes exist. The question becomes what their existence would mean. What happens to individuality when countless alternatives unfold? What happens to history when every possibility finds expression somewhere? What happens to meaning when reality ceases to be singular? The science itself does not answer these questions. Physics describes structures. Humans must confront the implication, and those implications reach far beyond equations. They reach into identity, choice, mortality, purpose, everything we use to orient ourselves within existence. Because the real challenge of the multiverse is not understanding how it might work. The real challenge is understanding what becomes of the human story if reality is far larger than any story can ever contain. At this point, it becomes tempting to treat the multiverse as a philosophical idea, a metaphor for possibility, a poetic way of discussing infinity. But the reason physicists continue to debating it is because some of its foundations emerge from real mathematics, real observations, and real attempts to solve problems inside established science. The multiverse is unsettling partly because it refuses to remain entirely in the realm of imagination. Its roots reach into some of the most successful theories ever developed. And nowhere is this more apparent than in quantum mechanics. Few scientific frameworks have been tested more thoroughly. For over a century, quantum theory has predicted experimental results with astonishing accuracy. The devices surrounding modern civilization computers, lasers, semiconductors, medical imaging systems depend upon principles discovered through quantum physics. Again and again, the equations tend to work, yet beneath their success lies a mystery that remains unresolved. Not a mystery about calculations, a mystery about reality itself. Quantum mechanics describes the behavior of matter and energy at extremely small scales. At these scales, nature behaves differently than everyday intuition expects. Particles do not possess neatly defined properties in the way classical objects do. Instead, they are described by mathematical structures known as wave functions. These wave functions represent possibilities, probabilities, potential outcomes. Before a measurement occurs, multiple outcomes may coexist within the mathematics. Then something strange happens. Observation produces a specific result. One possibility becomes reality. At least that is how the story is often told. But physicists have never fully agreed on what this process actually means. The equations predict outcomes remarkably well. The interpretation remains uncertain. This uncertainty has produced one of the deepest questions in science. What exactly happens when quantum possibilities become observed realities? For decades, various interpretations attempted to answer this question. Some proposed hidden mechanisms, some invoked randomness, some suggested information plays a central role, others accepted uncertainty as a fundamental feature of nature. Then, in 1957, a young physicist named Hugh Everett III proposed something radical. Perhaps nothing collapses. Perhaps the wave function never chooses. Perhaps every possibility continues. According to what later became known as the many worlds interpretation, reality does not eliminate alternative outcomes. Reality contains them all. When a quantum event possesses multiple possible results, the universe does not select one while discarding the others. Instead, the larger quantum structure continues evolving, encompassing every outcome simultaneously. Each possibility becomes part of an expanding collection of histories, not metaphorical histories, actual branches of reality. The idea remains controversial. Many physicists support other interpretations. Others view many worlds as a legitimate consequence of taking quantum mathematics seriously. The debate continues. Yet regardless of where one stands, the implications are extraordinary. Because the multiverse generated by many worlds differs profoundly from the multiverse created by infinite space, earlier duplicates emerged because reality became large enough to repeat itself. Now duplicates emerge because reality may continuously branch. The distinction matters. In an infinite universe, another version of you might exist somewhere unimaginably distant. In many worlds, alternative versions may emerge every moment. Every unresolved quantum event potentially contributes to an ever-growing structure of diverging histories. The image is difficult to visualize because human experience never reveals it directly. You perceive one sequence of events, one unfolding timeline, one continuous life. The branching, if it occurs, remains hidden. From your perspective, only one outcome becomes visible. Yet beneath that perspective, the larger structure may contain countless alternatives. Imagine standing at a crossroads. You choose one path. From ordinary experience, the other path disappears. Its future never occurs. Its possibilities vanish. Many worlds suggest something different. The path you did not choose continues elsewhere. Not as a hypothetical, not as imagination. As another branch within the total quantum description of reality. Again, this is not established fact. It is one interpretation among several, but it is an interpretation taken seriously because it arises from equations already known to describe nature with an extraordinary precision, and this is what makes the idea emotionally powerful. The multiverse does not arrive from mythology. It arrives from attempts to understand experiments, laboratories, measurements, data. The deeper scientists explore fundamental reality, the stranger the conceptual landscape becomes. What most people never realize is that quantum mechanics already challenges many assumptions about certainty. The multiverse simply extends those challenges further. We naturally imagine history as fixed, a single chain of events, one outcome replacing all alternatives. Quantum theory suggests reality may be less straightforward. Possibility itself may occupy a more substantial role than common intuition allows. And if possibilities are not discarded, if they continue existing within some larger structure, then reality becomes unimaginably rich and unimaginably complicated. Every moment generates new distinctions, new histories, new futures. The branching structure expands relentlessly. Not every second in a dramatic sense. Not every decision in the simplistic way often portrayed in fiction. The actual physics is far more subtle, yet the underlying implication remains. Reality may be vastly larger than the portion any observer experiences. Your life feels singular because consciousness follows one path through an immense landscape of possibilities, but the landscape itself may be far larger than the path. This realization creates an unusual form of existential discomfort. Death has traditionally represented the termination of a life, a definitive ending, a boundary beyond which experience ceases. The multiverse complicates that picture, not because it offers immortality. Many popular discussions misunderstand this point. Branches do not preserve personal continuity in any simple way. They do not guarantee survival. They do not transform mortality into a trivial concern. What they do is undermine the neatness of endings. Reality becomes harder to summarize, harder to package into a single narrative, harder to reduce to one definitive outcome, and humans are creatures that crave definitive outcomes. We seek conclusions, final chapters, clear endings. The multiverse repeatedly dissolves those boundaries, not only in cosmology, not only in quantum theory, but in our deepest assumption about how reality organizes itself. The universe begins to resemble less a story and more a vast structure of possibilities, an architecture of branching futures extending beyond observation. Most of those branches, if they exist, would remain forever inaccessible. No communication, no travel, no verification through direct experience. Only mathematics pointing towards something larger. Something hidden, something potentially real. And this is where scientific reality begins deepening into something emotionally stranger, because the question is no longer whether multiple universes exist. The question becomes what their existence would mean. What happens to individuality when countless alternatives unfold? What happens to history when every possibility finds expression somewhere? What happens to meaning when reality ceases to be singular? The science itself does not answer these questions. Physics describes structures. Humans must confront the implications, and those implications reach far beyond equations. They reach into identity, choice, mortality, purpose, everything we use to orient ourselves within existence. Because the real challenge of the multiverse is not understanding how it might work. The real challenge is understanding what becomes of the human story if reality is far larger than any story can ever contain. The most unsettling consequences of the multiverse do not emerge from physics. They emerge from ordinary human assumptions colliding with physics. Equations can describe a branching reality. Cosmological models can describe infinite space. Mathematics can tolerate enormous structures without emotional difficulty. Human beings cannot, because humans do not merely observe reality. They live inside stories. Every life is organized around a narrative. You remember a past. You anticipate a future. You connect experiences into a continuous thread and call that thread yourself. This process feels so natural that it rarely attracts attention. Yet it forms the foundation of identity. Without continuity, the self becomes difficult to define. Without a coherent narrative, meaning begins to fracture. The multiverse quietly challenges both, not because it proves individuality is an illusion, but because it forces us to examine assumptions we usually leave unquestioned. Consider a simple idea. Right now, you possess memories stretching backward through time. Childhood experiences, moments of joy, moments of embarrassment, people you loved, people you lost. Together, they create the feeling of being a specific person, a singular consciousness moving through a singular life. This seems obvious, and from your perspective, it remains true. Yet within many multiverse frameworks, countless observers may possess equally valid claims to that same history. Their memories match yours. Their childhood matches yours. Their identity feels as authentic as your own. The divergence occurs later. A different event, a different circumstance, a different future. At what point do they stop being you? The question sounds philosophical, but it reveals something important. Human identity depends less upon matter than upon continuity. The atoms inside your body change constantly. Most have been replaced many times throughout your life. Yet you still feel like the same person. What persists is not material. It is pattern, memory, structure, experience. Now imagine that pattern repeated. Not once, not twice, potentially countless. The comfortable boundary separating self from not self begins to blur. This does not destroy identity, but it complicates it. And complication has the way of generating discomfort. Because humans seek uniqueness not merely for pride. Uniqueness provides orientation. It tells us where we stand, who we are, why our experiences matter. The multiverse introduces a possibility in which uniqueness becomes local rather than universal. Your experiences remain yours. Your suffering remains yours. Your happiness remains yours. Yet the larger structure may contain innumerable variations, other lives, other outcomes, other versions of events. The implications extend beyond personal identity. They reach into choice itself. Most people experience decisions as meaningful because alternatives disappear. You choose one path, other possibilities vanish. History narrows. The future becomes more defined. This process gives decisions weight. Their significance emerges partly from exclusion. By choosing one thing, you lose another. By taking one road, you abandon countless others. Scarcity creates value. Finality creates meaning. But if reality somehow contains every outcome, the emotional landscape shifts. The decision still matters to the version of you making it. Yet somewhere other outcomes may continue unfolding. Other futures may persist. Other histories may exist. This realization often produces conflicting reactions. Some find it comforting, others find it deeply unsettling, because it appears to weaken the uniqueness of action. Yet the situation is more subtle, meaning does not necessarily vanish when alternatives exist. After all, countless people have experienced love before. That does not make a particular act of love meaningless. Countless civilizations have risen and fallen. That does not make any individual civilization irrelevant. Repetition does not automatically erase significance. Nevertheless, the multiverse changes the emotional context. Events cease being singular occurrences within all existence. Instead, they become occurrences within a much larger landscape, and that landscape can feel different, cold, vast, unconcerned. This is where the psychological pressure begins to build. Because human beings derive comfort from the belief that existence possesses structure, that events matter within some larger framework, that history moves towards something, that reality contains a coherent narrative. The multiverse offers no such reassurance. In many versions of the idea, reality becomes less like a story and more like a possibility engine, a mechanism generating outcomes, not selecting them, not judging them, not organizing them around purpose, simply generating, again and again, without preference, without intention, without end. This is profoundly different from traditional human worldviews. Ancient mythologies often placed humanity within a meaningful cosmic order. Religions frequently describe existence as purposeful. Even secular philosophies often assume history possesses direction, progress, development, evolution toward greater understanding. The multiverse threatens these assumptions by expanding the scale so dramatically that purpose becomes difficult to locate. Imagine standing inside a library containing every possible book. Some volumes contain wisdom, some contain tragedy, some contain beauty, some contain nonsense. The library itself does not prefer one category over another. It simply contains them. The multiverse introduces a similarly unsettling image. Reality may not privilege any particular outcome. Our universe may feel special because we inhabit it. Our civilization may feel important because we belong to it. Our lives may feel central because they are the only lives we directly experience. Yet from the perspective of a sufficiently large multiverse, these distinctions may become local phenomena rather than cosmic truths. This is not nihilism, it is scale. And scale often resembles nihilism when viewed from too close. A mountain appears indifferent to a single snowflake. An ocean appears indifferent to a single wave. A multiverse containing countless realities may appear indifferent to a single history. The discomfort emerges because humans instinctively want reality to notice them, not necessarily to reward them, simply to acknowledge them. The multiverse offers no evidence of acknowledgement, only vastness, only possibility, only structure unfolding according to laws that may operate on scales beyond comprehension. And perhaps the most disturbing implication is not that we become insignificant. It is that insignificance may no longer be measurable. In an ordinary universe, humanity is small compared to galaxies. Galaxies are small compared to cosmic structures. The comparison remains understandable. The hierarchy remains visible. Within a sufficiently large multiverse, the hierarchy itself begins dissolving. There may be no meaningful top level, no ultimate scale, no final reference point. Reality keeps expanding beyond every boundary we establish. Every horizon reveals another horizon. Every framework reveals a larger framework. Every attempt to define the whole reveals only a fragment. This creates a peculiar form of loneliness, not the loneliness of being physically isolated. The loneliness of existing within a structure so vast that complete understanding becomes impossible. The loneliness of recognizing that reality may extend far beyond anything consciousness can fully grasp. And this is where the scientific implications become emotionally transformative. Because the multiverse is no longer merely a theory about physics. It becomes a theory about perspective, about the limits of understanding, about the fragile position occupied by every observer, including us, including every civilization that has ever existed, including any civilization that may ever arise, each one looking outward from its tiny island of experience, each one constructing stories to make sense of existence, each one surrounded by a reality potentially larger than imagination itself. And beyond that realization lies an even deeper expansion, because until now, the multiverse has still contained versions of things we recognize. Alternate Earths, alternate histories, alternate observers. The next step moves beyond familiarity altogether, beyond alternate outcomes, beyond alternate civilizations, toward the possibility of realities so fundamentally different that even the concept of existence may take forms we would struggle to recognize. For most of this journey, reality has remained recognizable, larger than expected, far larger, yet still familiar. There have been stars, galaxies, planets, observers, histories. Even when discussing alternate versions of existence, the underlying structure has remained understandable. Matter behaves as matter. Time flows forward. Space possesses dimensions we can imagine. The universe may become enormous, but it still resembles a universe. This familiarity is about to disappear, because some multiverse theories do not merely propose additional universes, they propose additional kinds of universes, and once that possibility enters the picture, the scale of existence expands beyond geography, beyond history, and beyond anything resembling ordinary intuition. To understand why, we must return to one of the oldest mysteries in physics, the apparent fine-tuning of reality. The universe appears balanced upon a collection of numerical values known as physical constants. These numbers help determine the strength of gravity, the behavior of electromagnetism, the structure of atoms, the formation of stars, the existence of chemistry, the emergence of complexity itself. At first glance, these constants seem like technical details, numbers hidden inside equations, but their significance is enormous. If some of them were slightly different, reality would change dramatically. Stars might never form, heavy elements might never emerge, galaxies might fail to assemble, matter itself could become unstable. The universe would remain a universe, but it would be a profoundly different one, and perhaps an empty one. This observation has fascinated physicists for decades. Why do these values possess the particular numbers we observe? Why are the conditions compatible with long-lived stars, complex chemistry, and eventually life? No definitive answer exists. Some scientists suspect a deeper theory will eventually explain these values. Others have proposed a different possibility. Perhaps there are countless universes, each possessing different physical constants, different settings, different rules, different outcomes. Most fail to produce complexity. Some collapse rapidly. Some remain forever barren. A few allow A few allow chemistry. A few permit observers. And naturally, observers find themselves within the rare environments capable of supporting observation. This idea may sound speculative, and it is, yet it emerges from serious attempts to understand questions modern physics has not fully resolved. What makes the idea emotionally powerful is not whether it is ultimately correct, it is what it implies about existence. Because now reality ceases to be a collection of alternate histories, it becomes a collection of alternate laws. Imagine a universe where gravity is significantly stronger, stars burn rapidly, galaxies evolve differently, planetary systems struggle to remain stable, complex life may never have time to emerge. Or imagine gravity weaker, matter struggles to gather, structure forms slowly or not at all, the cosmos becomes diffuse and sparse. Now alter electromagnetism, alter nuclear forces, alter fundamental symmetries. Soon familiar reality begins dissolving. Atoms themselves may behave differently. Chemistry may become impossible. Stable matter may never appear. The universe may consist only of radiation, or collapse almost immediately after birth, or expand into eternal emptiness. Entire categories of existence emerge. Entire categories disappear. And suddenly our universe begins to look less like the inevitable form of reality and more like one successful arrangement among many possibilities. This is where the psychological scale expands dramatically, because humans naturally assume that reality is reality. The laws of physics feel absolute, permanent, necessary. The speed of light appears fundamental. Gravity appears fundamental. The existence of atoms appears fundamental. Yet within some multiverse frameworks, these features become local characteristics, properties of our cosmic region, not universal truths. The implication is subtle but destabilizing. Everything we call reality may be provincial. The deepest laws we know may describe only our neighborhood. The same way ancient civilizations once mistook their local geography for the entirety of the world, there is a certain humility hidden within this possibility. But there is also discomfort, because each scientific revolution has repeatedly removed another layer of certainty. First, humanity lost its central place, then Earth lost its central place, then the galaxy lost its central place. Now perhaps even our laws of physics lose their privileged status. Reality continues expanding beyond every boundary we construct, and with every expansion, familiarity retreats further into the distance. What most people never realize is that the terrifying aspect is not complexity, it is abundance. There may be far more realities than there are stars, far more universes than there are galaxies, far more possibilities than there are atoms in our observable cosmos. The numbers become so quantity itself stops carrying meaning. Language breaks. Visualization fails. Only implication remains. A structure generating realities on scales no observer could ever survey. A structure containing worlds where life never appears. Worlds where intelligence flourishes. Worlds where entirely different forms of complexity emerge. Worlds whose physical foundations differ so profoundly that no human concept can accurately describe them. And all of them may exist simultaneously within a larger framework, not separated by ordinary distance, separated by deeper barriers. Barriers built into the architecture of reality itself. The emotional consequence is a peculiar form of isolation. At first glance, a multiverse sounds crowded. Countless universes, countless possibilities, countless forms of existence. Yet the actual experience of any observer remains profoundly lonely. Every civilization remains trapped within its own cosmic bubble. Every observer remains confined to a tiny region of a much larger structure. The abundance exists, but it cannot be shared. It cannot be explored. It cannot be visited. It remains permanently beyond reach. Imagine standing in a dark room containing billions of books. You know they exist. You know they surround you. You know they contain unimaginable stories. Yet every book except one remains sealed forever. You may spend your entire existence reading a single volume. The rest remain inaccessible. The multiverse possesses a similar quality. Its vastness does not eliminate isolation. It intensifies it. Because now the loneliness is not produced by emptiness. It is produced by separation. The realization becomes even stranger when viewed through the lens of time. Every civilization throughout history has struggled with the same fundamental limitation. Knowledge remains local. Perspective remains. Awareness remains local. Even if the multiverse exists, humanity experiences only one narrow corridor through it. One branch, one universe, one perspective, an observer standing inside an immense structure but capable of perceiving only a tiny fragment. This may be the most important psychological consequence of all. The multiverse is not merely a story about additional realities. It is a story about limits. The limits of observation, the limits of knowledge, the limits of consciousness, the limits of what any finite mind can ever hope to understand. And those limits become increasingly visible as scale expands. The larger reality becomes, the smaller the fraction accessible to us. The richer existence becomes, the narrower our window into it appears. The result is a kind of cosmic vertigo, a sensation that the ground beneath familiar assumptions is slowly disappearing. The universe no longer feels like the whole. History no longer feels unique. Physical laws no longer feel absolute. Even existence itself begins fragmenting into possibilities, and somewhere beyond all these expansions lies a realization even more unsettling. Because if reality truly contains countless universes, countless histories, and countless forms of existence, then humanity's place within the cosmos becomes extraordinarily difficult to define. Not because we become small, we have already accepted that, but because the meaning of smallness itself begins to change. And when that happens, the human perspective starts to collapse under the weight of the scale surrounding it. For centuries, humanity has been adjusting to disappointment. Not personal disappointment, cosmic disappointment. Each major scientific discovery has revealed that reality is larger than we assumed, and that our place within it is smaller. The pattern repeats with remarkable consistency. Ancient observers imagined the Earth at the center of creation. Then came the realization that Earth circles the Sun. Later, the Sun became one ordinary star among hundreds of billions. The Milky Way, once mistaken for the entire universe, became one galaxy among countless others. Each discovery widened reality. Each discovery reduced our apparent significance. And yet something important survived. Human beings continued believing they occupied a unique position within existence. Not physically central, but existentially distinct. There was still one humanity, one history, one civilization, one observable universe containing everything that mattered. The multiverse challenges even this final refuge. Because once reality becomes a collection of universes rather than a single universe, the scale of comparison changes completely. Human civilization is no longer merely small relative to galaxies. Galaxies become small relative to universes. Universes become small relative to larger structures. The ladder keeps extending upward, and every extension further diminishes the apparent size of the human story. This is difficult to process emotionally because our lives already feel small. Most individuals experience only a tiny fraction of history. A human lifespan occupies less than a century. Civilizations persist for thousands of years. Stars endure for billions. The universe itself has existed for nearly 14 billion years. Against such scales, a human life already resembles a brief flash of awareness. Yet within a single universe, that flash still feels meaningful. Because it occurs once, because it belongs to a unique sequence of events, because its rarity grants it weight, the multiverse introduces a more unsettling possibility. What if the human story is not singular? What if civilizations like ours emerge repeatedly? What if countless worlds experience their own histories, their own struggles, their own discoveries, their own extinction? What if the rise of intelligence is not a unique event but a recurring pattern, a phenomenon appearing again and again across an unimaginably large landscape? The emotional consequence is subtle. Humanity does not become less real, but it becomes less exceptional. And humans have always been deeply attached to exceptionalism. Even when science removes one privileged position, we often search for another. If Earth is not special, perhaps life is. If life is not special, perhaps consciousness is. If consciousness is not special, perhaps intelligence is. If intelligence is not special, perhaps our particular civilization is. The search continues. The multiverse relentlessly undermines this instinct. Because every time we identify something unique, scale introduces the possibility that it may not be unique at all. Consider recorded history. Thousands of years of wars, inventions, migrations, philosophies, and cultures. The rise of agriculture, the construction of cities, the birth of mathematics, the development of science, the exploration of space. From our perspective, these events feel extraordinary, and they are. But within a sufficiently large multiverse, similar stories may unfold countless times, not necessarily synchronized, yet repeating certain patterns, complexity emerging, civilizations rising, knowledge accumulating, observers attempting to understand the cosmos around them. The realization creates a peculiar tension, because history feels meaningful precisely because it happened, not because it happened only once. Yet human intuition struggles to separate those ideas. We instinctively associate uniqueness with value, scarcity with significance, rarity with importance. The multiverse asks whether meaning can survive abundance, whether significance can survive repetition, whether purpose can survive some scale. These questions do not possess easy answers, but they reveal something important about the human condition. Much of what we consider meaningful derives from perspective. A sunset remains beautiful even though billions have occurred. A symphony remains moving even though countless performances exist. A friendship remains valuable even though other friendships exist elsewhere. Meaning does not automatically disappear when uniqueness disappears. Yet the emotional adjustment remains difficult. Because the multiverse forces us to view ourselves from a radically expanded perspective. Imagine observing Earth from orbit. National borders disappear. Political divisions vanish. Humanity begins to look unified. Now imagine observing Earth from another galaxy. The entire planet becomes invisible. Now imagine observing the observable universe from the perspective of a larger multiverse. Even galaxies vanish into abstraction. Entire cosmic histories become small components inside a much larger structure. This is where human intuition begins failing completely. Our minds evolve to compare villages, landscapes, and social groups, not universes, not cosmic population, not infinite structures. The multiverse pushes comparison beyond the range for which consciousness was designed. And when consciousness encounters scales it cannot properly process, it often responds with either denial or awe, sometimes both simultaneously. This reaction is understandable. The implications are enormous. Not because the multiverse necessarily diminishes humanity, but because it reframes humanity. We cease being the central story. We become participants within a much larger narrative, or perhaps within a structure that contains no narrative at all. That possibility is particularly settling. Humans naturally interpret events through stories. Stories possess beginnings, middles, endings, purposes, lessons. The multiverse may not. It may simply exist, a vast architecture of possibilities unfolding according to physical laws. No preferred outcome, no ultimate destination, no cosmic audience, only existence expressing itself through innumerable forms. For some people, this vision feels liberating. Reality becomes richer, larger, more creative. For others, it feels deeply alienating. The universe ceases to feel personal. The cosmos ceases to feel directed. Existence becomes a process rather than a plan. Neither response is entirely wrong. Both emerge naturally from confronting scales beyond ordinary experience. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. The multiverse does not merely challenge scientific assumptions, it challenges emotional assumptions. Assumptions about importance, about identity, about destiny, about the role humanity occupies within reality. For thousands of years, people have searched for their place in the cosmos. The multiverse does not remove that search, but it changes its context dramatically. The place we seek may not exist within a single universe. The question itself may require a larger frame. A frame so large that familiar concepts become difficult to maintain, because beyond humanity lies the universe. Beyond the universe may lie countless universes, and beyond those countless universes may lie something larger still, some deeper structure from which entire realities emerge. A framework so vast that universes become components rather than destinations. And if such a structure exists, then even the multiverse may not represent the final level of reality. It may only be another layer, another horizon, another reminder that every apparent boundary eventually gives way to something larger beyond it. By now, the universe has become difficult to recognize, not because its stars have vanished, not because its galaxies have disappeared, but because their role has changed. What once appeared to be the totality of existence has gradually become a component, a single layer inside the larger structure, a single room inside a larger building. And the unsettling possibility is that this process may not stop. Human history contains a recurring pattern. Whenever we discover what appears to be the largest structure, a larger one eventually emerges. The village becomes part of a nation. The nation becomes part of a planet. The planet becomes part of a solar system. The solar system becomes part of a galaxy. The galaxy becomes part of a cosmic web. Every horizon eventually reveals another horizon. Every apparent boundary eventually proves incomplete. The multiverse extends this pattern to its most extreme conclusion. But what if even the multiverse is not the final horizon? What if universes themselves emerge from something deeper? This question may sound speculative. In many ways it is. Yet modern theoretical physics repeatedly encounters situations in which reality appears layered. Structures emerging from larger structures, rules emerging from deeper rules, patterns nested inside larger patterns. The result is a growing suspicion among some physicists that what we call a universe may not be fundamental. It may be emergent, a consequence of something more basic. This possibility appears in several different areas of theoretical research, not as a single unified theory, but as a recurring theme. Again and again, the deepest levels of physics seem less solid than expected, less like objects, more like relationships, less like things, more like information. the shift is profound. For centuries, matter appeared to be the foundation of reality. Then atoms were discovered. Atoms revealed subatomic particles. Particles revealed quantum fields. And deeper investigations increasingly suggested that familiar reality emerges from structures hidden beneath direct experience. The world becomes less tangible the further we descend. In some modern approaches, information itself begins occupying a surprisingly fundamental role. Not information in the everyday sense, not message, not language, something deeper. Patterns describing possible states of reality, relationships governing how those states evolve. The details remain highly technical. Many questions remain unresolved, yet the philosophical implications are extraordinary. Because reality begins resembling a process of organization rather than a collection of objects. The universe becomes something that emerges, not something that simply exists. And if universes emerge, the obvious question follows, from what? What larger framework produces them? What deeper structure gives rise to entire realities? No one knows. But various possibilities have been proposed. Some involve deeper quantum structures. Some involve mathematical frameworks. Some involve landscapes of physical possibilities. Others remain entirely speculative. What matters for our journey is not which proposal proves correct. What matters is the direction in which the search points. Again and again, science discovers that apparent foundations are not foundations. They are layers, and beneath each layer waits another. Imagine standing inside a vast cathedral. The walls appear permanent, the floor appears solid, the architecture appears complete. Then someone reveals that the entire building rests upon hidden supports, and those supports rest upon deeper foundations, and those foundations rest upon geological structures extending far below. The building remains real, yet its apparent completeness dissolves. The universe may occupy a similar position. Real, magnificent, vast, yet potentially supported by deeper structures hidden beyond observation. This possibility becomes even stranger when mathematics enters the discussion. Mathematics possesses an unusual relationship with reality. Physical theories are written in mathematical language. The behavior of stars, galaxies, particles and fields can often be described through abstract structures that exist independently of observation. Why mathematics works so well remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. Some thinkers have suggested a radical possibility. Perhaps mathematical structures are not merely descriptions of realities. Perhaps they are reality. In such views, universes become manifestations of underlying mathematical possibilities. Reality becomes a vast landscape of structures, some capable of supporting observers and some not. Again, this remains speculative, yet its implications are staggering, because now existence expands beyond physical universes entirely. The multiverse becomes a collection of all mathematically possible realities, a framework so enormous that ordinary language begins failing completely. The distinction between physics and philosophy starts blurring. The distinction between possibility and existence becomes uncertain, and once again the human perspective shrinks. Not because humanity becomes smaller, because the framework containing humanity becomes larger. The process repeats relentlessly. Every expansion leaves us occupying a smaller fraction of the whole. Every deeper layer reveals a wider context. And perhaps the most unsettling aspect is that there may be no final layer, no ultimate floor beneath reality, no final answer waiting at the bottom. Human beings instinctively expect foundations. We expect explanations to end somewhere. A final principle, a final cause, a final truth. The multiverse, especially when embedded within larger frameworks, threatens that expectation. Reality may not terminate in a single ultimate explanation. It may continue unfolding indefinitely, layer beneath layer, structure beneath structure, horizon beyond horizon. The emotional consequences are difficult to overstate. A finite universe allows closure. A universe with a beginning and end can be understood as a complete story. A multiverse complicates that story. A hierarchy of multiverses complicates it further. Eventually, reality begins resembling an endless landscape without obvious boundaries. Not chaos, not randomness, Structure, but structure extending beyond any observer's capacity to fully map it. And this is where a peculiar form of isolation emerges. Not the isolation of being alone, the isolation of being finite. Every civilization is finite. Every mind is finite. Every scientific theory is finite. Yet the structure being investigated may not be. The gap between observer and reality grows larger with every expansion. The more we learn, the more visible that gap becomes. Knowledge increases, perspective widens, yet the totality recedes faster than understanding can advance, like walking toward a horizon that continuously moves away. This is not a failure of science. It may be an inherent feature of existence itself. The universe once appeared understandable because it appeared bounded. The larger reality becomes, the more difficult it is to imagine complete comprehension. And perhaps that is the deepest shift introduced by the multiverse. Not that reality becomes larger. Reality has been becoming larger for centuries. The deeper shift is that reality may become fundamentally unfinishable. An endless hierarchy of structures, an infinite expansion of context, a landscape in which every answer reveals a deeper question beneath it. And if that is true, then the greatest challenge facing conscious beings is not survival, not technology, not exploration. It is learning how to exist within a reality that may never fit entirely inside the mind. Because beyond the expanding hierarchy of universes lies something even more emotionally unsettling. Not larger structures, not deeper foundation, but silence. The realization that no matter how vast reality becomes, every observer remains trapped inside a tiny window of awareness, and that window may never be large enough to see the whole. The deeper the multiverse becomes, the lonelier it feels. This may seem paradoxical. After all, loneliness is usually associated with absence. An empty room, a deserted landscape, a silent planet. The multiverse appears to offer the opposite. Not emptiness, but abundance. Not isolation, but countless realities. Not one universe, but potentially endless universes. And yet abundance does not necessarily eliminate loneliness. Sometimes it intensifies it, because loneliness is not merely the absence of others, it is the absence of connection, and the multiverse, if it exists, may be the largest collection of disconnected realities imaginable. Every civilization that has ever looked toward the stars has shared a similar hope. The hope that somewhere beyond the darkness, another intelligence might exist, another mind, another perspective, another consciousness capable of understanding what it means to exist. The search for extraterrestrial life is driven by many motivations. Scientific curiosity, exploration, discovery, but beneath them all lies something deeply human, the desire not to be alone. For decades, astronomers have scanned the sky for evidence of life. Radio signals, technological signatures, atmospheric traces, any indication that intelligence has appeared elsewhere. So far, the universe has remained silent, not necessarily empty, simply silent. The silence itself has become one of the great mysteries of modern science. Our galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars. Many possess planets. Some of those planets almost certainly resemble Earth in important ways. Given enough worlds, life seems plausible. Given enough time, intelligence seems possible. Yet no clear signal has arrived. No confirmed message. No unmistakable sign. Only silence. This puzzle is often called the Fermi paradox, the contradiction between the apparent likelihood of extraterrestrial civilizations and the absence of evidence for their existence. Numerous explanations have been proposed. Perhaps intelligent life is rare. Perhaps civilizations destroy themselves. Perhaps communication is difficult. Perhaps we are searching incorrectly. No consensus exists. The silence remains. Now imagine expanding this silence beyond a single universe. Imagine a multiverse containing countless realities, countless galaxies, countless stars, countless opportunities for life. The number of possible civilizations becomes enormous. The abundance becomes overwhelming. And yet the silence remains. Because even if these civilizations exist, they are separated by barriers more absolute than distance. A distant galaxy can, in principle, be observed. Its light eventually reaches us. A sufficiently advanced telescope may reveal its structure. Its stars participate in the same physical universe. The separation is immense, but not absolute. The multiverse introduces something stronger. Permanent separation, not difficult communication. Impossible communication, not distant neighbours. Unreachable realities. Entire universes may exist beyond every conceivable form of contact. Civilizations may flourish. Art may emerge. Science may advance. Philosophies may develop. Entire histories may unfold. And none of it can ever cross the boundary separating those realities from ours. No signal, no spacecraft, no bridge, no conversation. The separation is total. This realization transforms abundance into isolation. The multiverse may contain more life than imagination can grasp. Yet every observer remains trapped within a tiny local region, like prisoners inside separate rooms of an infinite structure, aware that other rooms may exist, unable to enter them, unable even to conquer them. The emotional weight of this idea is subtle. Human beings often assume that knowledge reduces loneliness, and sometimes it does. Understanding the world can create a sense of belonging. A sense of participation in something larger. The multiverse complicates this relationship. Knowledge reveals a larger reality, yet that larger reality may be forever inaccessible. The more we learn, the larger the invisible territory becomes. The more horizons we discover, the more unreachable horizons appear beyond them. There is something haunting about this. Imagine standing on a shoreline at night. Far across the ocean, countless lights glow. Cities, communities, lives. You know they exist, but no ship can reach them. No message can cross the water. The lights remain visible yet inaccessible forever. Now expand that image to cosmic scale. Then beyond cosmic scale, the multiverse becomes an endless archipelago of unreachable lights, each universe illuminating itself from within, each isolated by boundaries that cannot be crossed. Each observer confined to a tiny island of appearance. What makes this particularly unsettling is that consciousness itself appears local. Every observer experiences reality from a single perspective. You never directly experience another mind. You infer its existence. You communicate through language. You build bridges of understanding. But consciousness remains fundamentally private, even within a shared universe. The multiverse extends this privacy to reality itself. Entire universes become isolated perspectives. Entire histories become inaccessible interior experiences. The structure resembles consciousness on a larger scale. Separate domains, separate narratives, separate experiences. No direct access between them. Only inference. Only possibility. Only speculation. And perhaps this is why the multiverse feels emotionally heavier than ordinary cosmology. The observable universe is vast, yet it remains unified. Everything participates in the same cosmic history. Everything belongs to the same expanding space-time. The multiverse fragments that unity. Reality becomes plural. Existence becomes distributed across disconnected domains. The whole becomes less like a story and more like a collection of stories that can never meet. Human beings have always feared isolation, exile, separation, disconnection. These fears evolved in social environments where belonging was essential for survival. The multiverse transforms those ancient instincts into something cosmic. Not isolation from a tribe, isolation from entire realities. Not separation from individuals, separation from possible universes. And the deeper implication may be even stranger. Because if reality is truly fragmented in this way, then no observer can ever know the whole. Not humanity, not an advanced alien civilization, not a civilization millions of years older than ours. Every observer remained as local, every perspective remains partial, every understanding remains incomplete. There is no obvious vantage point from which the entire structure becomes visible. The dream of total knowledge begins dissolving, not because intelligence is insufficient, because reality itself may be too large, too distributed, too fragmented. A finite observer confronting an effectively infinite structure, this creates a kind of existential humility rarely discussed. Science often expands knowledge. The multiverse expands awareness of ignorance. It reveals not merely how much exists, it reveals how little any observer can access. The gap between reality and experience becomes enormous, perhaps permanently so, and in that gap lies a profound loneliness, not despair, not hopelessness. Something quieter, the recognition that consciousness may always occupy a tiny illuminated circle surrounded by immeasurable darkness. A darkness not necessarily empty, a darkness overflowing with possibilities, with histories, with civilization, with realities, yet still inaccessible, still silent, still beyond reach. And as strange as that realization is, an even deeper question remains. If existence is this vast, this fragmented, this indifferent to our need for connection, then what becomes of meaning itself? What becomes of purpose? What becomes of value? Because it's eventually every exploration of the multiverse arrives at the same destination. Not physics or digital six, not cosmology, philosophy. The unavoidable question of whether anything can remain meaningful inside a reality so large that no observer will ever see more than a tiny fragment of it. When people first encounter the idea of the multiverse, they often assume the greatest challenge is scientific, understanding the equations, understanding inflation, understanding quantum mechanics, understanding the mathematics of infinity. But eventually the scientific questions give way to something quieter, something older, something that has accompanied human beings long before telescopes, particle accelerators, or cosmological models. The question of meaning, not meaning in the sense of definitions, meaning in the sense of significance, purpose, value, the feeling that existence matters. For most of history, meaning and scale appeared connected. The world felt meaningful because it felt intimate. Ancient civilizations lived beneath a sky that seemed constructed for human observation. The stars moved in recognizable patterns. The sun rose and set with reassuring regularity. Reality felt personal. Even when it appeared mysterious, it remained close. Science gradually expanded that world. The Earth became smaller. The cosmos became larger. Yet meaning survived. Humanity adapted. People discovered that significance does not require centrality. A person can live a meaningful life even on an ordinary planet orbiting an ordinary star. The universe can be vast without rendering experience worthless. The multiverse pushes this adaptation further, because now reality is not merely large, it may be overwhelmingly abundant. Histories multiply, possibilities multiply, observers multiply, entire universes multiply, and naturally a concern emerges. If everything possible happens somewhere, does anything truly matter? At first glance, the question appears devastating. If countless versions of events exist, why care about this version? If innumerable realities unfold, why value any particular one? If every outcome occurs somewhere, why invest significance in outcomes at all? The concern is understandable, yet it may reveal more about human psychology than about reality, because meaning has never depended entirely upon uniqueness. Consider music. A symphony may be performed thousands of times. Its beauty does not vanish. A sunset may occur every evening. Its beauty does not vanish. Friendship, love, courage, grief, none derive their value from occurring only once. They derive value from being experienced, from existing within consciousness, from shaping lives. The multiverse does not automatically erase this. A larger reality does not invalidate local experience. In fact, local experience may become even more important, because it is the only portion of reality any observer directly inhabits. This is an idea philosophers have encountered repeatedly throughout history. Human beings do not live inside abstraction, they live inside moments. No one experiences the entire universe. No one experiences cosmic history in its entirety. No one experiences the totality of existence. Each consciousness occupies a narrow corridor, a small window, a brief perspective. Meaning emerges within that window, not outside it. The multiverse may expand the structure surrounding an experience, but it does not replace experience itself. Your joys remain real. Your losses remain real. Your relationships remain real. Your awareness remains real. The scale of existence changes. The immediacy of existence does not, and yet the multiverse still introduces a profound philosophical challenge, because it weakens many traditional sources of meaning. The idea that humanity occupies a privileged position, the idea that history unfolds toward a specific destination, the idea that reality revolves around a central narrative, these assumptions become increasingly difficult to maintain. The cosmos begins resembling a landscape rather than a story, a structure rather than a plan, a possibility space rather than a script. For some people, this feels threatening. Purpose appears harder to locate. Significance appears less obvious. Yet there is another way to view the situation. Perhaps meaning was never something supplied by the universe. Perhaps meaning emerged from participation within it. Ancient starlight does not become meaningful because it was created for us. It becomes meaningful because conscious beings can witness it. The universe does not become beautiful because beauty is written into physical laws. It becomes beautiful because awareness encounters it. The multiverse may not remove meaning. It may relocate it. From the structure of reality to the experience of reality, from cosmic intention to conscious perception, this shift is subtle but important. A universe with purpose offers reassurance. A multiverse without obvious purpose offers responsibility. Meaning becomes something created rather than discovered, something experienced rather than imposed, something local rather than universal. There is a certain loneliness in this realization, but there is also freedom, because if reality is unimaginably vast, no single perspective can claim complete authority. No civilization occupies the center. No observer sees the whole. Every consciousness becomes a partial witness to a larger mystery. In that sense, humility becomes unavoidable. The multiverse transforms certainty into perspective, and perspective into wonder. What most people never realize is that wonder and uncertainty are deeply connected. The universe felt mysterious when ancient humans first looked upward. It remains mysterious now. The details have changed. The scale has changed. The questions have changed, but the fundamental experience remains. Awareness confronting something larger than itself, trying to understand, trying to locate its place, trying to reconcile finite perception with infinite possibility. The multiverse represents perhaps the ultimate version of this encounter, not because it provides answers, because it expands the questions. It reveals how much larger reality may be than any story humans have told about it, and strangely that revelation does not necessarily diminish life. It may deepen it. A brief existence becomes more precious when viewed against vast scales. A conscious moment becomes more remarkable when surrounded by cosmic darkness. The rarity of awareness becomes more striking when existence itself appears indifferent. The multiverse does not guarantee purpose. It does not guarantee significance. It does not guarantee comfort. What it offers instead is perspective, a perspective so large that familiar assumptions begin dissolving. And when those assumptions dissolve, something unexpected can emerge. Not certainty, not answers, a different relationship with mystery itself. The acceptance that reality may exceed understanding, that existence may extend beyond explanation, that consciousness may forever occupy only a tiny fraction of what is. And perhaps that is where the deepest philosophical consequence resides, not in the possibility of countless universes, but in the recognition that reality may be fundamentally larger than any framework humans create to contain it, a recognition both humbling and beautiful, and also unsettling, because one final implication still waits beyond it, an implication that transforms the multiverse from a question about existence into a question about death itself. For most of human history, death has occupied a singular position within the imagination. It is the ultimate horizon, the final uncertainty, the boundary beyond which experience disappears. Civilizations have built religions around it. Philosophers have spent entire lifetimes trying to understand it. Poets have circled around it for thousands of years. And despite all our scientific progress, death remains one of the few realities every human being must eventually confront alone. There is something strangely simple about that. Not emotionally simple, not psychologically simple, but structurally simple. A life begins, a life unfolds, a life ends. The story possesses boundaries. However mysterious those boundaries may be, they remain recognizable. The multiverse introduces a possibility that is far more unsettling, not because it defeats death, not because it offers immortality, but because it challenges the neatness of endings. Human beings are narrative creatures. We understand existence through beginnings and conclusions. Every story requires closure. Every journey requires an arrival. Every life appears to require a final chapter. Death serves that role. It gives shape to existence. A finite life becomes meaningful partly because it is finite. Moments matter because they pass. Opportunities matter because they disappear. Time matters because it runs out. Mortality creates structure. Without it, human experience would feel profoundly different. Yet within some interpretations of the multiverse, the idea of a definitive ending becomes increasingly difficult to define. Not impossible, difficult. Because reality itself ceases to behave like a single narrative. Instead, it becomes a landscape of possibilities, a branching architecture of outcomes, a structure in which countless versions of events may unfold simultaneously. And here we encounter one of the most psychologically disturbing ideas ever associated with the multiverse. Not because it is established science. It is not, but because it emerges naturally from certain ways of thinking about infinite realities. Imagine a reality containing every physically possible outcome, every arrangement, every variation, every history permitted by the laws governing existence. Such a structure would not merely contain successful civilizations, it would contain failed ones. Not merely lives that continue, lives that end, not merely worlds where observers survive, worlds where observers vanish. Every possibility would find expression somewhere. The immediate reaction is often relief. If every possibility exists, perhaps some version of us always survives. But this reaction overlooks something important. Identity is not a collective phenomenon. Consciousness remains local. The existence of another version of you does not automatically preserve the continuity of your experience. A duplicate consciousness elsewhere does not become your awareness. A parallel history does not become your future. The problem remains. Mortality remains. Individual lives remain finite. Yet something strange happens to the concept of finality itself. The larger reality may contain endless continuations, endless alternatives, endless branches, endless observers. Even while every individual observer experiences limitation, the result is a peculiar tension. Death remains personal. Existence becomes impersonal. The individual story ends. The larger structure continues, again and again, without obvious conclusion, without obvious destination, without obvious purpose. This is where the multiverse begins feeling more terrifying than death, because death is finite. Death possesses boundaries. The multiverse may not. Humans evolve to fear endings. We rarely consider the possibility that endlessness might be more unsettling. Yet many philosophical traditions have quietly recognized this possibility. An infinite existence can become more difficult to comprehend than a finite one. A reality without ultimate conclusion can become more disturbing than a reality with one. The multiverse introduces precisely this problem, not endless life. Endless possibility, not eternal consciousness, eternal generation. Reality continuously producing outcomes, continuously creating histories, continuously expanding structures, without final chapter, without final resolution. Imagine reading a book that never ends. Not because it repeats, not because it loops, because new pages continue appearing forever. No conclusion, no final meaning, no ultimate summary. The story expands faster than it can be understood. The multiverse carries a similar quality. Reality becomes a process rather than an achievement, an unfolding rather than a destination. This deeply conflicts with human intuition. We expect conclusions, we expect closure, we expect existence to lead somewhere. The multiverse offers no guarantee of any such thing, and perhaps the most unsettling implication emerges when we consider Scale 1 final time. Earlier we imagined countless histories, countless civilizations. Now imagine all of them together, an incomprehensible structure generating realities across unimaginable savannas of possibility. Observers appearing, observers disappearing, stars igniting, stars dying, galaxies forming, galaxies fading, entire cosmic eras unfolding, again and again, across a landscape so vast that ordinary concepts of beginning and end lose meaning. Within that structure, humanity becomes difficult to locate, not because humanity is insignificant, because the framework itself becomes overwhelming. The scale no longer permits intuitive understanding. A human life resembles a spark. A civilization resembles a brief pattern. A universe resembles a temporary event. Everything becomes local. Everything becomes transient, even cosmic history. And this is where the emotional center of the multiverse reveals itself. The fear is not that we become small. We have known that for centuries. The fear is that reality may possess no final scale at all. No ultimate reference point, no edge, no center, no ending. Only continuous expansion into larger and larger frameworks. A hierarchy without visible termination. A process without visible completion. Death, by comparison, begins to look strangely comprehensible, a finite life ending within a finite perspective. The multiverse replaces that clarity with boundlessness, and boundlessness can be psychologically overwhelming, because finite minds rely upon limits. We understand things by defining them, rating them, containing them. The multiverse repeatedly destroys those containers. Every horizon opens into another. Every boundary reveals a larger structure. Every ending dissolves into further possibility. And perhaps this is the final terrifying implication. Not that reality contains countless universes, not that alternate histories exist, not that physical laws vary, but that existence itself may be fundamentally inexhaustible, a process that never reaches completion, a structure that never arrives at a final form, a reality so large that no observer, no civilization, and perhaps no intelligence of any kind could ever comprehend it in its entirety. The ancient fear of death emerged from confronting the unknown. The deeper fear of the multiverse emerges from confronting the unknowable, not a mystery waiting to be solved, a scale that may forever exceed solution, a reality that continues expanding beyond every framework consciousness creates to understand it. And standing before that possibility, death begins to resemble a closed door. The multiverse resembles a corridor without end. After a certain point, scale stops feeling large. It begins feeling quiet. The first discoveries in astronomy expanded the universe dramatically. New planets, new stars, new galaxies. Each revelation carried a sense of excitement, a widening horizon, a larger map. But eventually the expansion becomes so immense that excitement gives way to something else. A kind of stillness. Yes. A recognition that reality may exceed not only our knowledge, but our ability to emotionally process what we know. The multiverse brings us to that threshold, not because it has been proven, it has not because countless universes have been observed. They have not. But because it forces us to contemplate what existence might look like if the boundaries we assume are not real boundaries at all, and once that possibility enters the mind, it becomes difficult to completely forget. The universe no longer feels self-contained. History no longer feels singular. Reality no longer feels finished. Everything becomes part of something larger, and that larger thing may itself be part of something larger still. Yet despite all of this expansion, your immediate experience remains unchanged. The stars still rise above the horizon. The earth still turns beneath your feet. The same sunlight that illuminated ancient civilizations continues arriving each morning. The same atoms forged inside long-dead stars continue composing every living thing. The vastness surrounding existence does not alter the texture of ordinary life. It merely changes its context. This contrast may be the strangest aspect of all. A person can spend an afternoon drinking coffee, walking through a familiar street, listening to distant traffic, completely unaware that modern physics has opened the possibility of realities beyond imagination. The ordinary and the infinite coexist effortlessly. The local and the cosmic overlap. Human life unfolds at one scale while existence itself may operate at another entirely. Perhaps this is why the multiverse feels less like a scientific theory and more like a philosophical mirror. It reveals how much of our understanding depends upon assumptions. Assumptions about uniqueness. Assumptions about endings. Assumptions about reality itself. Many of those assumptions function perfectly well in daily life. They help us navigate the world. They help us construct meaning. They help us organize experience. Yet when viewed from sufficient distance, they begin looking less like universal truths and more like local perspectives. Useful, necessary, but incomplete. There is something humbling in this realization. For thousands of years, humanity has attempted to construct a final picture of reality. A complete framework, a finished map. Every generation has believed it stood closer to the end of the journey. And every generation eventually discovered another horizon, another mystery, another layer hidden beyond the previous one. The multiverse may simply represent the latest horizon, or it may represent something more profound. A sign that reality itself is not the kind of thing that can be fully enclosed within a single framework. A sign that every map will remain partial, every perspective local, every understanding incomplete. If so, then perhaps uncertainty is not a temporary condition. Perhaps it is part of the structure of existence, not ignorance waiting to be eliminated. A permanent feature of being finite within something larger. There is no tragedy. Yes, only perspective. The night sky remains beautiful despite containing mysteries. The ocean remains beautiful despite its depths. A forest remains beautiful despite the countless lives hidden beyond immediate sight. Perhaps reality functions similarly. Its value may not depend upon complete understanding. Its mystery may be inseparable from its beauty. And yet the unease remains, because mystery becomes heavier when attached to immense scale. A hidden room inside a house feels intriguing. A hidden continent feels overwhelmed. A hidden reality beyond our universe introduces a different emotion entirely. The sense that existence may be larger than any story humans have told about it, larger than religion, larger than philosophy, larger than science itself. Not because science fails, but because science continually reveals new levels of depth. The deeper we look, the larger reality appears. The larger reality appears, the smaller certainty becomes, and eventually a strange calm emerges from that process. Not the calm of answers, the calm of perspective. A recognition that every observer throughout history has occupied the same position, standing inside a small illuminated circle of understanding surrounded by darkness. The circle grows, the darkness grows faster. Yet the act of looking remains meaningful. The act of asking remains meaningful. The act of wondering remains meaningful. Perhaps that is the most human response to vastness. Not mastery. Curiosity. Not certainty. Wonder. Not possession of truth. Participation in its pursuit. The multiverse, whether real or not, invites that response. It reminds us that existence may be stranger than expectation, larger than imagination, more layered than intuition, and that the deepest questions often remain open, suspended, waiting, not because they lack answers, because reality may be larger than any answer can fully contain. As the scale slowly recedes into the background, another realization begins to emerge. The multiverse was never really about other universes. Not entirely. It was about perspective, about confronting the limits of certainty, about discovering how small a finite observer can become without disappearing entirely, about learning that insignificance and meaning are not necessarily opposites, and about recognizing that the vast darkness surrounding knowledge may never be empty, only unexplored. Perhaps that is why the multiverse lingers in the mind long after the equations fade. Not because it provides answers, because it changes the shape of the question. Death has always occupied a clear position within human thought, a boundary, a horizon, a final unknown waiting somewhere ahead. The multiverse introduces a different kind of unknown. Not a destination, a scale, not an ending, an expansion, a possibility that reality may continue beyond every framework we create to contain it. And there is something quietly unsettling about that. A finite mystery can eventually be approached. An infinite mystery recedes forever. The deeper humanity explores existence, the more reality seems to resemble a landscape without obvious edges. Every generation discovers a larger horizon. Every horizon reveals another. The process continues. The universe becomes larger. Then the multiverse becomes larger. Then perhaps something larger than the multiverse waits beyond that. The pattern itself becomes the message. Reality may not possess the kind of final boundary we instinctively expect. Yet tonight, none of those immense structures change where you are. You remain on a small world orbiting an ordinary star, inside a galaxy drifting through darkness, inside a universe whose full extent remains uncertain. The room around you remains the same. The air remains the same. The distant sounds of the world continue as they always have. And perhaps that contrast is the most remarkable thing of all. A conscious mind, existing briefly inside a vast and possibly endless reality, capable of contemplating it, capable of wondering, capable of looking outward into depths it can never fully reach. The multiverse may exist. It may not. Future discoveries may strengthen these ideas. They may replace them entirely. Science will continue moving forward. Questions will continue evolving. The horizon will continue shifting. But the deeper lesson remains. Reality is repeatedly proven larger than expectation, stranger than intuition, more expansive than comfort. And each time the picture widens, humanity finds itself standing in a smaller corner of a much larger mystery. Not erased, not insignificant, simply finite, a brief awareness inside an ancient cosmos, a tiny island of consciousness surrounded by distances beyond imagination. Perhaps death remains frightening because it marks the limit of a life. The multiverse feels frightening because it hints that reality itself may possess no comparable limit, no final edge, no final chapter, only deeper layers fading into darkness. And somewhere beyond every known horizon, beyond every galaxy, every universe, every theory, and every attempt at understanding, the mystery continues, silent, unfinished, waiting,